Thank you, Madam Program Quality Director. With a career built on leadership and technical expertise, Stefano McGhee is passionate about empowering individuals and organizations to thrive. His journey began in the world of IT, information technology, where he currently serves as a director of DevOps and infrastructure. But his true passion lies in communication and leadership, a passion ignited by his 18-year journey with Toastmasters International. As a distinguished Toastmaster, DTM, two-time district director and past and current board member, he has witnessed firsthand the transformative power of effective communication. His experiences in the corporate world, coupled with his military service as a lieutenant colonel in the Rhode Island National Guard, have further honed his ability to navigate complex situations and inspire action. Today, Stefano balances his professional pursuits with a love for adventure and Toastmasters, whether it's soaring through the skies, cruising the waterways, or exploring new horizons on two wheels. Gosh, it sounds like he's James Bond. He believes in embracing life's opportunity with enthusiasm and dedication. Today, Stefano will be giving a presentation on adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership is how a leader works through an ever-changing environment to continue to be successful. Please welcome Stefano McGhee.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be with you here today. I don't take any of these engagements for granted, and I mentioned that to Paul when he was wishing me well today. I wanted to make sure, I says, hey, it goes both ways. I'm happy to be here to speak to you all. So thank you all for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you on adaptive leadership. So if you've read about adaptive leadership, you might have seen it in Harvard Business Review, which is where I work. It's the ability to anticipate future needs, articulate those needs, and build collective support and understanding, adapt your responses based on continuous learning, and demonstrate accountability through transparency in your decision-making process. Yes, that's a lot of words, but we're going to take that apart so that maybe, just maybe, a few hours after I'm done, you'll still remember. That's always the goal. So, why is that important? It's important because you need the ability to tailor your leadership style. Adaptive leadership is not about having all the answers. It is about embracing that you don't know things and that you have to be agile to be successful to lead. Even before the global pandemic, we were constantly faced with change. Can you remember back that far? Yeah, there was still change. But COVID-19 only accelerated and expanded the levels of uncertainty and change. I don't know about you, but at this point, I take nothing for granted that what happened last year is going to happen this year. And now that the global pandemic has resided somewhat, things are still changing. Yes, I know, you've heard it before. The only thing that's constant in life is change. However, let's be real here. As human beings, we like to look for varying places where we can say things are consistent. We expect the sun to rise in the east and set in the west. We expect to see good times and bad, and we expect good things from loved ones and friends. But change is all around us. And there are some of us even out there, you've seen them, maybe you're one of them, that even thrive in change. Amid all of this, there's Toastmasters, an organization that's committed to the betterment of its members. We help each other by giving, working with them to get the confidence they need to be the best versions of themselves. Our organization is where leaders are made, is it not? However, without adaptive leadership, how can we lead as the world changes around us? As Toastmasters, we lead an organization that instills confidence in others and changes the world through people. Those people are trying to get everything that they can out of our program. Now, our program can't continue to grow if we insist on top-down leadership. We need leaders that can inspire, empower, and mobilize people to adapt and thrive in today's dynamic environment. And we need them at all levels of our organization. So I ask you a question. What are the biggest challenges that you see leading in an ever-changing environment? And ladies and gentlemen, that's not a rhetorical question. Throw something in chat, put your hand up, come off of mute. What do you see as the biggest challenge for you leading in an environment that's always changing? Paul, I saw you come off of mute. I saw you.
I would say come up with a backup plan, constantly a contingency plan. The host of the meeting has a flu, the conference chair resigns, things like that happen, and we need to adapt constantly. So yes, a contingency plan. The keynote speaker may not show up, right? And we know that at the last minute.
Yeah, that does happen. And I see Ray Miller's at allowing team members to be curious and even encouraging them to be curious. But, well, Paul, you actually mentioned some of the things that you could encounter when it comes time to trying to figure out, well, what are big challenges? And that's just in Toastmasters. I would say that there are other big challenges with what if the leadership at the company where you work changes? How might that affect you? What if the rent, if you're in an apartment or something, a rented property, and that goes up unexpectedly, how do you deal with that? What if there's an unexpected car repair that you need? These are things that happen before COVID-19, but there's even more opportunities for change. Like when you mentioned the venue, some venues unexpectedly close when you don't expect them. And how do you deal with that? So when you consider developing adaptive leadership, I want you to consider the following 5 principles to guide your work. Don't worry, we'll go slow. Adaptive leadership is dynamic and agile, and so is the approach. So number 1, I heard something about Paul recently. Consider that the data that drives your organization is varied. Be ready to adapt to it. Voraciously consume data as often as you can and look for trends. But understand that data is not always quantitative. Qualitative data is also important. When dealing with human beings, which we do, it's sometimes hard to put into discrete numbers how people feel and their levels of enjoyment. Look around the room for the people that have their cameras on. Look at the number of people that have their cameras on. And look for their levels of enjoyment. Look for smiles. Look for laughter. Look for rapt attention. Those things are hard to quantify. But seeing these things in large quantities shows that you're succeeding. Are you missing those qualitative bits of data? Look for where the good things are happening and be ready to duplicate that. Numbers matter, but never overlook the experience of your members that is sometimes only able to be viewed as qualitative. So I'm curious to hear a couple of you tell me, how do you gather data in your district? And that too is not a rhetorical question. I'd like to know, how do you gather data in your district?
Paul is very good with data. I think he's an expert because he'll be the first one to do the spreadsheet. He puts the formula and he can whiz up a list of whatever we need. And so I rely heavily on him, but I know sometimes we rely on the Toastmaster website as well to get our data. So that's.
But to go back to what Stefano was saying, numbers are one perspective, of course, and we wish we could visit as many clubs as possible. Of course, it's very hard, right? We have 88 clubs, so we try our best, but there is always an element of unknown when we gauge the district, and we rely on our councils, our area director councils, division councils, to get feedback from the clubs, right?
Excellent. Yeah, that's the best you can do, because like you said, you can't do it all yourself. And I always like to make sure we tell the area directors, it's not that I don't have the time, but you're there and you have a different perspective, and you do ask for qualitative feedback about how a club is doing. So make sure that you keep that right on par with the quantitative that you're able to get, because both matter, specifically because we're dealing with human beings, and you know how difficult human beings can be. So you have to have a fuller picture of the experience in order to make great decisions and to be able to adapt. So what's the next? Oh, wait, before we do, I'll look over here. I see Dan's posted that a greatest challenge is changing our community culture to be co-creative and generative in our learning to keep our community actively engaged. There is a need for a paradigm shift of how we used to operate to how we need to operate post-pandemic, because you can say, well, you know, the pandemic didn't change who we are. No, but I feel as though it really changed our expectations. And I think that's what we need to adapt to. So what's the principle number 2 that we need to talk about? Well, check your theories against the reality in your world. I don't know about you. I went through the district trio 1 2/3 times. Many of our predecessors has developed ideas and plans that have worked consistently well for years until they didn't. Don't let that happen to you. Look at your existing plans and ask if they truly work today and if they will work tomorrow. Plan ahead. You might doubt your ability to predict the future. I'm no prognosticator myself, but start with next year. Just next year. What if a large company in your district closes? How does that affect your ability to start and maintain your clubs? What happens if it's a colder than expected winter? Does that have an effect on things? We were expecting that if it was a colder than expected winter in Europe this past year, that the political problems that were happening there might cause a problem for people to pay for their dues. What if prices for venues suddenly rise over the next few months? Playing what if is a great way to get you thinking about what you do now and how to adapt to it to still achieve success if it changes. During my time in the military, that's all we did. I spent years generating exercises and simulating wartime environments with everything from nerve agents to nuclear attacks. One of the weird things that happened to me right the year before I retired was that I was asked as essentially a IT officer advising the general to come up with a plan on what the state would do if there was a global pandemic. And people said, oh yeah. I said, what are we going to do with this? Why would we ever use this? That doesn't happen. But hey, I'm glad that we did that. That was one of the many plans that was really dusty that we pulled out and said, well, there's got to be something good in here that we can use. So never doubt that you playing what if and guessing at how your district and how your professional life and how your personal life will go forward, it's worth the time to think it through. We did a lot of simulated radio outages during all those exercises and computer outages because I'm in IT. But we learned something about ourselves because what could we do? What did we take for granted about communication? And how is it critical to understanding how we would work around that and how we would operate when we couldn't communicate in different ways? For the folks that went to mid-year training, we did something around changing how you could communicate and saw how it affected the tone of how things could happen. So playing that what if game is really important. So it doesn't have to be Paul and Lucinda, but I'm curious, has anybody else out there played like what if in their personal or Toastmasters life to simulate, well, what would happen if this happened and how would we overcome it? Oh, there must be some.
As a refinery manager, we were constantly looking at things. Now I'm out of date. I'm taking you back to 1991. But as we had more hydrogen on site, we had 11 times the hydrogen on site that the space shuttle carries. And on day 4 of our startup at 2 a.m., the windows of my house 2 miles away from the refinery broke. And we had a fire. Luckily, we had done some predictive planning. We were able to cool and not put out the fire, because if you put the fire out, the gas will travel down to the nearest farm, find the ignition source in their stove, and come back to us. We had done plume planning, seeing where any gas escaping from and we went out and met with the local communities and said, look, this is what's going to happen if something goes wrong. What would you like us to do? And it was engaging with them that way that built trust in the community and prepared us for that afternoon and what we were doing 12 hours after the initial explosion.
Thanks, Dan. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes we're required to do it, and for good reason. And so that's pretty, and it tells you more about your process and shows that you're thinking about things, because you might have a emergency that comes up that's not exactly what you planned for, but pieces of that plan are still usable. And I think that's part of the mind exercise that you go through. And I see in the chat, when Janice was working as a DBA before retiring, a lot of what if and recovery planning. If we lose this database, how long does it take? How do we get around that? So a lot of planning for things that are unexpected, but doing that really makes you smart and gets you to realize what's important. So the next adaptive leadership principle that you should look for is streamlining decision-making. When we need to make decisions and they have to make their way all the way up the command chain and all the way back down the command chain, decisions get bogged down. It's kind of like bureaucracy. Changes on the ground happen faster than decisions can usually happen at the top, and that they can respond to those changes. The best organizations allow leaders to make decisions quickly at the lowest possible level. Examples of this are everywhere throughout history. And I remember one that came to mind as I was thinking about this was the German Blitzkrieg in World War II. The Germans were practicing very low-level decision-making. They told their folks on the ground, this is the long-term goal, this is what we're trying to do overall, and this is what we think you're going to do to get there, but you're in charge. You figure it out. And so there were times where tank brigades were rolling through towns and they started to make progress, and their adversaries were saying, we didn't expect them to be here. Let's call up to our headquarters and ask them what to do next. We think we should probably fall back, but we're not sure. While they were waiting for a response, the Germans said, hey, they're not moving. Let's keep going. And the Germans kept going. And then their adversaries would say, wait a minute, we didn't expect them to do that. What should we do now? And they were, if you're into OODA loops, the military talks about often, what is it? Observe, orient, decide, and act. Their cycle was so fast that they could basically decide, or decision-making was so fast that no one could keep up with them, which is why they were so successful when they were practicing their blitzkrieg techniques. Decisions were being made on the ground based on what the people that were acting thought made sense. Now, yes, I understand. You need to make sure that the folks on the ground have the knowledge to do that. But we have that capability in Toastmasters where we're trying to make these leaders, to create these leaders. So always consider how you can do that and do it better. Always look to empower leaders to make decisions at their level using the data that they see. Of course, there should always be communication up and down the chain, but empowering your leaders lets you move faster and get to success faster. Be transparent about the decisions that you make. This isn't the military, regardless of that decision or that example I just gave you. I understand this isn't the military. Include the why behind what's being done. So the fourth principle, yes, we're already at the fourth principle. The fourth principle is to consider that you ensure your decision-making has transparency. And I just alluded to that in the last one. But not just transparency, accountability. Accountability. Transparency isn't just about including the why behind your decision. It also includes admitting when you're wrong. That's right. You're a human being. I'm making a logical jump here. Yeah, I know. You're a human being and you make mistakes. Me too. From the regular laborer all the way up to the prime minister, we all make mistakes. Adaptive leadership means that you admit your mistakes and you share them so that we can all learn from them and be better. I know I try to do that with my son. It's not very successful. He's 16, so you must understand. But we must understand also that in a dynamic environment where everything is new and we're seeing things we've not seen before, we cannot be expected to be 100% correct every time. It's not realistic. We're just humans. But if you understand this and you embrace this, well, it allows us to ensure that we all learn from our mistakes and we all get to the next level together. So another question for you out there, lest you fall asleep on me. Were there any of you that have sessions where you reflect on decisions, either on your own or as a team, where things have gone wrong and how you could do them better the next time? Do you do that in Toastmasters, in your professional life, in your personal life? Do you ever reflect on decisions you made and where they might have gone wrong?
I think it happens often, especially when you're part of a trio and you see your actions, you see how they trickle down somehow right to the member, and you wonder how your message is conveyed. I really get what you're saying about, acting at the lowest level, making transparency in your decision, explaining the why. This is really very good tips. Yes, definitely.
Thanks, Paul. Anyone else? I don't want to leave anybody else out, be part of the party here. Oh, go ahead, Louise.
I'll jump in. Yeah, at my work, we are a major retailer, and the first week of January, we have debriefings. I do 6 or 7 hours worth of debriefings with different groups. What worked, what didn't work, what are the solutions or ideas moving forward, what prevented us from being successful, what made us successful, and how can we do more of it? And then we amalgamate that and share it back to the various leaders from different divisions and departments throughout the company. And that's been something we've been doing for many years. And what's really interesting, Stefano, is the first few years, people were kind of shy to say things. Now it's a massive brain dump. They know that the ideas are going to be moved forward and worked on. In some of the teams, it was pretty cool because we're like, well, that was an issue last year, but it's not on our list this year. We did well. Let's congratulate ourselves. And every year there's a ton of planning that goes into it. They make a massive amount of their profit in those 2 months. So there's a lot at stake. But every year there's always something, some hiccup. COVID, the pandemic was a big example, but we've also had a lot of weather situations where logistically shipments aren't getting through, things like that. Fires in the stores, all sorts of things that have happened that we can't predict, but we can at least anticipate and work at the lowest levels, like what you're saying, to figure out how to improve things or get things back on track faster.
But
So it's
Louisa,
quite an agile program that we do.
how do you keep things positive, Louisa?
Well, we start with the what worked, right?
Mhm.
And go through that, but it's a collaborative thing. And it's also, it's not about finger pointing. It's more about making things better as a process and in the improvements. And what's kind of cool is there's a lot of transparency. There are reports back to the initial groups on, well, here's where we're at with that particular initiative, or here's why we won't be able to move forward on it just yet because of this priority, that priority, whatever. So there's a flow, and we just use Confluence and Excel sheets. It's very simple. It's visible for anybody from the company to go in and take a look at, you know, what our team is doing or what we've commented. In some cases, people even put their name beside the comment just so that follow-ups can happen and more details can be gathered. Yeah, so
That's
that's
good.
some
Sounds like
part
fun.
of what I'm doing at work. Yeah.
Thanks, Louisa. What's going on, Price?
Hi, Stefano. Nice seeing you at the mid-year training. When I was a division director, I implemented a feedback process where when we are on Zoom, so when we have our area contest and even the division contest, all the functionaries will stay back and we'll discuss what went well and what we can improve. And what happened is that every step of the way, we see improvement every time. Every time we had another contest, it was a little bit smoother and a little bit smoother. And even this year as a PQD in my district, when we are implementing TLI in person, it's fully in person this year for the first time since COVID. And we are doing the same thing. We're implementing new systems. We used to do evaluations for presenters online, just drop the link. We can't do that in person. So I implemented a QR code. When I did that in the summer, it didn't go well. Everybody was like, how do we use this and things like that? So you need a little bit more education. Second time around, everybody's like, I need a QR code. I'm going to post it here. I'm going to post it there. So we went around and look over it, and it works better. It seems like if you keep doing that, keep looking at what doesn't work, what worked well, and we can always improve every step of the way.
Thanks, Price. I thought I saw Luzena was popping in there briefly. I don't want to leave you by the side of the road there unless you...
Just wanted to comment briefly that Toastmasters have the resource called the Moment of Truth, which we focused heavily on for the first part of the year. And we had asked all our area and division directors to simulate that in the council meeting as well as clubs. So they practice first in the area council and then they go on to the club meeting level. So we can get a better understanding what's going on with each club so the district can have a better response.
Awesome. Yes, and Louisa is actually right there with you in the chat about why Moments of Truth is so important, because that's when you figure out, as long as you can get the whole story of feedback about where your club is and how you can make it better. So thanks for posting that as well. All right, let's see. Where are we in this grand journey?
And
final...
I would encourage everyone to turn on their camera. It's more, lively if we see your face. So please consider turning on your camera.
Yes, especially since I've been spotlighted. So now, yours is just, it won't be prevalent on the screen, at least till I'm done. So don't worry, I'll take one for you guys. Oh my. All right. The final principle. That's what we were talking about. So you've almost arrived. The final principle in adaptive leadership is making sure that you understand that leadership is a team sport. You must be how shall we say, you must be part of the effort. You must make sure that your team is part of the effort. In order for them to truly be part of the team, though, you have to ensure that they are committed to the effort. And that's truly easier said than done, isn't it? I know you've all been in that meeting, and I'm not going to say it was Paul because, Paul is here and Paul's great. But you've been in the meeting with maybe a district director, a district governor, where they say, we're going to be Smedley Distinguished this year. That's going to be our goal. Who's with me? And everyone's like, yeah, sure. And you're like, no, nobody's buying into that. It's not. We will say, sure, yeah. We're going to start, 50 clubs this year. Oh, yeah, with you. Like, really? And your team is not with you, and you know it. And that's a problem. We're saying yes, but you don't get the feeling that's going to actually happen. If you're going to do that, it requires you to take the time to get to know your team members, how they think, how they operate. They have to believe in you as a leader, and in order to do that, they have to trust you and your cause. When I was a second lieutenant in the Air Force many years ago, as an officer, they didn't make me do a lot of the stuff that I had the folks in my unit do, but I chose to go out and do that with them anyway. So I found myself crawling around airplane hangars with cables, trying to connect computers and things, set up a network. And I was everywhere where they were. If we were moving heavy cargo, I was out there moving heavy cargo. And they're always like, sir, you don't have to do this stuff. That's what we're for. And I'm like, well, yeah, but if I do this with you, then I understand when there are problems that you bring to me. I'm like, I remember that. I saw that. I did that too. I understand where you are. And what the extra payoff was is like, well, this guy is a good guy because he works with us. He understands what we do. And even in Toastmasters, you've got to do the same thing. For them to believe in you, they've got to trust you and the cause. And you build trust by investing your time in them. Do they have a favorite vacation spot? Do they have a favorite way to relax? A favorite pub? What drives them to be successful? You have to take the time to understand this for the people on your team, because that's how you earn their trust. And you're better able to mobilize them to achieve success. By knowing your team, by taking the time to understand them, what makes them tick. It's not to get inside of their head. It's to show them that you care enough to spend your time to learn about them as human beings. Most human beings like that. You don't have to know about anybody. You don't have to meet anybody, shake anybody's hand. But when you put the effort in to learn about somebody, to really learn about them, that gets a lot of trust and a lot of respect. So with that last principle, we've talked about 5 things, not 4, but 5 things. Number 1, consider the data. Remember we were talking about that a while ago? 2, check your theories against reality often to make sure they still jive with reality. 3, make decision-making streamlined, simpler. 4, make sure that your decision-making is transparent and accountable. And number 5, please make sure that leadership is a team sport. But how can Toastmasters help with that? Hey, at its foundation, it certainly can help you determine what kind of leader you are. I've completed a few paths and pathways, and at the end of some of them, it has you do that project where you find out what kind of leadership skills you have. So I did mine a couple of times, and I come up with being a democratic and affiliative leader. And if you don't know what that is, go check it out. It's pretty good. You've probably seen it. But depending on your experience with leadership, that may sound really easy or really hard. One of the largest challenges in leading is that you have to lead people. Remember those human beings I was telling you about before? It's challenging to lead human beings because people are fickle. They have a lot of personal problems that have nothing to do with you, but it may make them less inclined to share their goals and help you understand what drives them. That is predominantly why leadership is so difficult. People are different, everyone. And there's no one leadership style that works for you or for the group of people that you're trying to lead. While you may be comfortable in one style, The team or the situation may demand another. And knowing which style it is not always obvious. I surely don't approach a leadership opportunity saying, let's see, is this an affiliative kind of opportunity or is it an authoritative kind of opportunity? Maybe I should know which one to use, but I don't. During my current job, my supervisor gave me a task and said, okay, Stefano, you need to back up our intellectual property differently than we do today. We want to make sure that we're protected against not just accidental loss, but also ransomware, to make sure if we have an internal operative that encrypts all of our our intellectual property, that it's not in effect stolen from us. Sounded like a good idea to me, made sense. So I went back to my team and said, all right, we've got some new work to do, and this is what we need to do. I understand how it shouldn't be too big of a deal to do it. And so I said, okay, guys, can you get this done? And they're like, well, we don't really see why you would need to do that or why you would want to do it that way, because we can mitigate it this other way. And I'm like, not exactly. But we need it done this way because it fulfills the requirements of security and governance and all of those things. I understand what you're saying. It's true, but the way that governance works, sometimes we have to do it a certain way to make sure that we meet the needs. I get that. My guys did not. And I tried to understand, well, let me see what I can do about making this work through consensus. What's stopping you from understanding how to do this? Is there a piece that's missing? Is there something that's going on that you don't get? Because, if we work on it together, we'll get there. Well, you know what? We didn't get there. I tried to understand where they were coming from, what they were thinking, trying to make them understand what I was thinking. We sat down, it didn't work. After a bunch of wasted weeks, I said, you know what? Just do it. Just do it because I said to do it. And it needs to get done, and we're already behind. Just do it. My leadership style had to change because rather than coaxing them along, I needed to just make them do it. That was extremely uncomfortable for me to just tell them to do it because it needed to happen. It wasn't natural for me to lead that way. And it took me a while to realize why I was so uncomfortable. To be entirely transparent here, there is nothing wrong with being authoritative and directive. That is simply another leadership style. Using it all the time is a problem, unless you're in wartime. But there's nothing wrong with that leadership style so long as it's used when it's necessary. But it was uncomfortable because I didn't do it enough. I didn't practice it. If you don't exercise for a while at the gym, you'll notice that it happens to you too. If you don't exercise a muscle, if my, how shall we say, diplomatic muscle was well worked out, and I had no problem with that. But if I looked at my authoritative muscles, it hurt right after I started moving it. I said, wow, I really need to work on that. It's almost as though we need a leadership gym to work out our authoritative and bureaucratic skills. I certainly could stand to bulk up here and there, and virtual training just isn't cutting it. Toastmasters is kind of like a leadership gym. You've probably heard this many times before, but Toastmasters is the best place to go to get your leadership in shape and practice adaptive leadership. Now, a sort of inside joke for those of you that were here during the registration. I am Stefano, this is Toastmasters, and we're here to pump you up. That is exactly what Toastmasters is about. Arnold Schwarzenegger reference, maybe? Okay, there you go. So think about Toastmasters that way, is that it's a leadership gym where you can try that. You're like, really? We can be authoritative in Toastmasters? Like, well, if you're at the conference and you need someone to go check on something to see where it is, it's not a discussion topic because you need to know, is this session still going or are they done? Can you get me some intel on what's going on in there? And It's not well, why do you need that information? Wait, is there another way that we could do this? No, I need it now. Can you just go do it? And so understanding that there are times that it makes sense and times that it doesn't make sense, Toastmasters has those opportunities for you. To sum it all up, I'd like you to ensure that you play your part in Toastmasters by following those principles that I talked about. Create a culture of learning and development everywhere where your fingers go, be it at the club, the area, the division, or throughout the district. It doesn't matter how small your organization is. If you make your world better, others will follow. Empower others to make decisions. Don't micromanage. I'll give them the opportunity to succeed or fail. Toastmasters should be, must be, the best place to learn to be a leader. Don't silo your teams. The marketing people, the club building people should talk to the education people, should talk to the conference people. You are creating a cross-functional team. Form them, celebrate their successes. Diverse perspectives lead to better outcomes. I understand. My dad told me, Stefano, stick with what you're good at. And that's true. But there's opportunities for cross-functional leadership that can actually bring more value to all of our teams. Finally, celebrate success. In Toastmasters, we don't get paid. So ensure you spend your time ensuring that the team knows how much your work is appreciated and how much their work means to you. They will all most of your members will show up once to help you. They'll only show up again if you appreciate them. Join me on a journey of adaptive leadership. It's less about being perfect and more about being just a little bit better than we were the day before. Let's challenge ourselves to be faster and more focused in our leadership, but don't forget to support each other. When we work together, we succeed together. Thank you. And I'm open to questions if you have them.
I have one question. You were talking about empowering others, and I started thinking about delegating. And I'm wondering, where do you see delegating fitting in this process? And can you share some insights on how you have approached delegating responsibility?
The Toastmasters examples. When I was, and I'll only speak for myself, when I went through the trio the first time, I was district director, district governor back then. I was everywhere. I was in every meeting, every conference meeting, every marketing meeting. I was everywhere. The second time through the trio, I was nowhere. And I tell you why. Because I realized that my presence was taking away from the ability of others to lead. They would just easily look over their shoulder and say, "Oh, Stefano, what do you think about that?" That's not empowering them to make a decision. I would tell them, here's the confines, here's the box. There we go. Almost. There we go. There's the box. Just play within the box. The second time through, when I found a conference chair, I said, you pick the theme. I'm good with whatever. You pick the venue. Just make sure it's within this amount of money. And they're like, well, don't you want to review it? No, you own this. And you're like, how could you not have input into where it's being held? I'm like, does it really matter? If they know what the confines and the requirements are, let them figure it out. And what I learned is the more, again, you have to have the right people, trust but verify and all that, but you don't find the right people until you take a chance on some folks. And you say, oh, wow. One of my favorite stories, Ralph, was when I was district director the second time, If you've all gone through the realignment process, when you're putting clubs in the right place or whatever, we had one area that was 4 clubs, and then for some reason it dropped down to 2 after we did the realignment. And then of course world headquarters came back to me and said, Stefano, what is up with this? Why have you only 2 clubs in this? They go, oh, you know, we didn't plan on that. Well, you're going to have to fix it. And so I said, okay. And I looked at the division director. I said, can you fix that? And they said, wait, what? I don't know what to do with it. I'm like, sure you do. They told you what you need to do. Rejigger all of these clubs so that they fit in there, and send me what you got, and then we'll send it in. I don't know how to do that. Of course you do. You're a division director. You know the clubs in this area. And they did. They came up with a solution that I wasn't thinking about. And that was why. And I told them that, I was like, I didn't see that. To this day, that woman who redid that, next year she was program quality director. And then she was district director, because she said, I didn't think I could do that until you gave me the opportunity to succeed. Again, trust but verify. It's easy to throw things over the wall and then walk away. You're not that kind of leader. You're better than that. So you have to set people up with an opportunity to own something, not micromanage it as much as you might want to, and say, I have other things to worry about, and let the district conference be their district conference. To make the keynote selection process, they found the keynote, they did it. They figured out a new marketing incentive to do this, because then they own it and they want it to succeed. And now they're working for you instead of doing what you want them to do. So anyway, that was my experience. It's not perfect. I'm telling you the highlights. Were there failures? Yes, of course there were. Some humans there weren't up to the task at the time, but you wouldn't find it unless you took the chance on them. And by golly, Toastmasters, you can make those mistakes here. Nobody loses their job. Nobody gets evicted from their home. Nobody's paycheck is garnished because they failed as in their role at Toastmasters. So you have that blessing. Anyway, that's my opinion. Other
Stefan,
questions?
yes. You went from, I think you said you have a background in the military, and this is a world where everybody obeys the rules. There is lots of discipline, and you are now in a world of Toastmasters where we are a bunch of volunteers, and it's impossible to dictate anything, as you said, right? I was curious as to your journey from this world of discipline to this world of non-for-profit, and how challenging is it to adapt actually to this kind of situation. And I know that when we are in Toastmasters, I mean, for me, I think one important kind of tool we have is, as you alluded to, we have recognition, we have incentives, right? And people are sensitive to that. But I would like to know your take.
Wow, there's a lot of stuff there, Paul. I'll do my best. So,
Okay.
I was going to say, it sounds like you said the difference between the military and Toastmasters, and then also recognition.
Exactly. Between the military, where people obey the rule and there is no problem. I mean, whatever the leader of a general, whoever is going to say, they know that people are going to follow the rule, right? As opposed to Toastmasters, where you cannot, in fact, it's very hard because we are volunteers. So it's probably more challenging to convey a message and to see action. I wanted to know your take on that.
Sure. I'm often asked about the difference between the military and Toastmasters, like, oh, they're all very, very different. And I said, yeah and no. Yes, you can't just command people to do things in Toastmasters. It's actually off-putting. So that doesn't work very well. But that wasn't what I did every day in the military. A lot of it was still getting to know the people on my team, getting to know what makes them tick. I still did that. And you're like, well, does it matter? Oh, yes, it matters, because when the time comes when you are in wartime, they want to know that their leader cares as much about them as they do about the mission. That makes them a lot more likely to trust what you're doing, because you've invested with them during the times of peace, to make sure that you look at them and says, is everything going all right with you and your spouse? I had to do that. It's not corporate in the military. And as a military commander, you actually know about your people's spouses, children, personal lives. You need to know about these things, because these are people that you're serving with, and it matters to you. And I bring a lot of that over to Toastmasters because it's important to me. You have to know the people that you're serving with, because it matters. Yes, there are, in the military, we were asking you to do things during wartime, but I felt like I couldn't do that well enough unless I was a good leader during peacetime. So that it definitely comes over. The recognition bit is challenging. That's where I think there's a little bit of a departure for Toastmasters versus the military, because both in the military and Toastmasters, there is not money given out. There's not. I have a small collection of medals that I got while I was in the military, and I love that I got them, and I can point at each one of them and say, this is why I received this one. This is why I received this one. And sometimes I wonder if that would work in Toastmasters. I mean, we have our DTM medals. We have people at different levels in recognition, but I feel as though where most of us in the military, we looked at the recognition of a medal, a little bit of ribbon, if you're a Napoleonic type person, that meant a lot to us. Sometimes in Toastmasters, like, we'll get certificates. I'm not going to speak for any of you, but over my time in Toastmasters, I've collected a stack of certificates of things, of going to do things. And at the end of the day, I'm just happy that I came to see you. And I hope that you got something good out of it. But what could I still rack my brain to try to figure out what we can do in Toastmasters? Because recognition is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but is it a trophy? Is it a designation? Is it a certificate? What does it take to truly resonate and to really uplift the people that do the great things? I did a presentation at another district not too long ago, and they said, well, our members have stacks of trophies and certificates. And I said, you know what? The only thing I can think of is to give them something personal that nothing else can replace. And for me, that would be Paul. It means a lot to me, and that your trio has invited me to come see you and speak to your members. I don't get the opportunity to do that. It has come up more often since I've been elected, but I take none of them for granted. The idea that I can share my ideas with you and your members, it means so much to me. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity. That's all I can give you. But I hope that you might say, well, that was really nice of him to say that. And it might stick with you, maybe more than a day or two. But it's heartfelt. I didn't just make it up. Well, I did, but I mean it. But I mean it. And I think maybe that's where we are right now, is that and it's hard as district director, as a trio, to go around and thank everybody like that. But the fact that you're probably tired and spent after you did it means you did the right thing. And that, hey, look, I buy things for my wife from Amazon. It's super easy, right? You go, you click, it shows up, and you give it to. This probably should be more, right? So that's how I look at recognition in Toastmasters, is at this point, all I can give you is myself. And that is all that that can truly matter. Does that help, Paul? I hope.
Thank you. Yes.
Anyone else?
No.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Jim, and
The question I have is, do you find differences between your Toastmaster audiences in North America, in Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia? Or can your message stay the same and resound the same?
I think so. Obviously, some references to Arnold Schwarzenegger and, Saturday Night Live might not go as well in other parts of the world. But I believe that keeping the concepts the same does work to some degree. And that's a challenge of Toastmasters, is to stick to those. Well, this is, of course, U.S. Constitution stuff, those inalienable truths, things that transcend who we are and where we are, that apply to each other. That, I guess, I was talking about that earlier on in the adaptive leadership thing, which is we expect people to be decent people and to do good things and to want to be better. That's all of us. Now, that might go over well in some parts of the country, certain parts of the world, excuse me, but in other parts, they're not looking for people to rise up. But I guess it's just about how you frame it. But that's a great question, Jim. It's a thought-provoking question. I try to stick to things I feel resonate no matter where. But yeah, you do have to be careful about how you approach these things. But I want you to know, Jim, that I did think about the fact that I was talking to mostly Canadians after this. I'm like, yeah, most of this is still good for my friends to the north. They're okay. They're okay with me. One thing that I did note was there are different levels of formality in different parts of the world, and that's something that I'm still working with. I'm a less formal person by nature. I mean, I did put on a shirt and tie for you all because I figured you expected that. But I always argue with my wife. I says, one of these days I want to show up in one of those CEO T-shirts with the jacket in front and the CEO sneakers. Like, I want to do that. Like, that's me. And she's like, I don't know if Toastmasters is ready for that. I'm like, but why are we? This is post-pandemic, man. Everybody's more casual now. Like, you don't see as many ties as you used to, or like holding on to the past here. But I understand. I'm doing my best to bridge the gaps. I mean, I think like in Europe and Asia, there is more of a sense of formality than in North America. And that's broad brushstrokes there, Jim. Probably dangerous broad brushstrokes. But I feel as though like in a lot of places in North America, the level of formality has come down a little bit. But in other parts of the world, no, they want formal talks with a little bit less humor and more pointed statements. So I've never gotten that out of my friends to the north. They're okay with my humor for the most part. So I'm happy with that. Did I get you, Jim? Good, more or less.
Yes, you did.
Thank you.
Yep.
I see Luis's hand up.
Yes, my question is related to recognition as well. So has Toastmaster thought about putting higher the bar in putting a recognition higher than DTM? I think that sometimes putting a new goal increases the enthusiasm, the determination of the members to get there. So has Toastmaster thought about that?
Well, it's what I can tell you, Luis, and I'm sure Luisa will tell you the same thing, is I'm sure someone's thought about it. It would be foolish to think that nobody did. But I think about it every so often when I see people that have like DTM2, DTM3, DTM8. And I was like, well, should we come up with something else? I mean, of course, that would throw everything into disarray because now Distinguished Toastmaster is the highest thing that we have. But I'm with you that maybe now is the time, and maybe it has to do with getting a second DTM or a third one and then something else. But I look at it as, again, I'm also a video game player. And, I like to have some new content every so often and something new to strive for. It keeps the game fresh. And look, I'm second vice president here. It's still a fun game for me to play the educational process, the educational program in Toastmasters. I still enjoy it, but how do I change it up? How do I make it different? So I think about it. I'm sure World Headquarters is thinking about it. Is that at the top of the list to come up with? No, probably. No, I can actually assure you that it's not. But I would be interested in saying, well, what if we pulled together a group of, 6, 8, 10 Toastmasters and said, what would the next one look like? What would we call it? And I think that is a good idea, to get it from our members and say, well, if we were going to come up with something, this is what it would be. And maybe it'll be geared towards things that our organization needs right now. Maybe it'll be being part of the marketing effort more, bringing in new members or starting a new club. I mean, we have that now, but how can we dig into that? Maybe it's around retention. Yeah. How, what can we do to really bring the distinguished Toastmaster to the next level? So hold on, Luis, and I'll make a note, because that's a good one. It's a good one to remember.
Thank you.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I brought this because I've seen, for example, in those networking businesses, they do that, and they increase the goals and putting a higher goal, right? It's a good goal to achieve more recognition, but also doing a more significant work and learning more, right? Sometimes it's not okay, staying in the comfort zone. Okay, I'm already at DTM, and okay, I'll continue with my clubs and doing. But sometimes it's good to demand, and not always demand, right? Because it's volunteering, but it's motivate enough that people moves up and put more effort and be decided to continue learning. That I'm sure that in Toastmasters always we're learning more, right? So I think that could be a good step in getting higher, putting higher that bar.
So Luis, there was a word in there that I keyed in on that reminded me, yeah, I did think about this. And that is maybe not create a level that's higher than DTM, but create, again, sorry, video games, create challenges that are limited time. Like, so over the next 24 months, starting in this year to this year, you have to complete this, and this to get this designation. It's one time only. And you can only get it during this period of time. And so that way we can change it 2 years from now. Okay, well, now we're going to have, this is the new competition, and this is what you're going to have. And it starts on July 1st of this year and runs until this year. And you can try and get it all done in 6 months, but it's going to be hard to do. So you have to wait. And I think that creates, Luis, that creates that excitement that you're talking about, refreshes the program. Yes. Okay, more writing.
Move butts quickly and get higher and learn more and be growing more, right? Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
I have a couple of comments on this. Luis, you may consider the leadership track. Maybe next year you want to be the Area 22 director. That would be interesting. And there is as well the accredited speaker program. I don't know if you know of that. Of course, it's more professional, but some Toastmasters want to pursue this route, although it's quite a hard one. If you want a challenge even beyond DTM, think about that.
Okay, I'll think it over. Thank you. Well,
I see Dan's got his hand up.
Hi. I'd be interested. I loved the question that Luis just had. And one of the things that I thought about, I come to a lot of these trainings at 96, and I see a lot of the same faces at various styles of meetings. And when people speak here, they speak from a place of dedication to a cause. They speak from a place of shared understanding and values. And I was wondering, you've got a pretty broad background, diverse background in watching cultural formation and cultural transition. What do you see in the people that are coming to the table and taking action and filling in those blank spots when someone doesn't show up on short notice and are always there? What is it that you see that enables people to be in that spot? And how can we change our culture so that more of our members feel the power of being in this room? If that's
Yes,
meaningful.
I guess you have to. That's real deep, by the way. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get there, but it's a great question. I think you have to start with the people that are already here and say, why do you do this? why do you do this? And we did I think it was it 2019 or 2020 when I was on the board as an international director, like Louisa was, and we went to mid-year training. We asked a whole bunch of district leaders. Well, we asked them a lot of questions, but there were two that were really interesting responses for me. And we asked them, number one, why did you get into district leadership? And they said the things that you would expect to hear, which is, I'm going to work on my management and leadership and organization and financial acumen. And I said, okay, yeah, okay, this is really exciting stuff that you're doing here. But the second question that was relevant is, now that you're in district leadership, why do you stay? And that had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with, I like serving my fellow members. I like to put on events where people say, wow, that was a great event. I had a great time. Thank you, Luzena, for putting on that event. And then Luzena says, you know what? I might do that again. That was good. Like, when people appreciate the work that you do and that it's beneficial to them, you stick around because you are paid with the happiness of others. And I think that's why a lot of these people keep showing up, is because they're like, well, I got to keep this thing going. People appreciate that I'm here, or I get something out of this and I'm doing something to make my club better, whatever. So I think when we talk about bringing people into leadership, we need to stop talking about, hey, when you're an area director, you get to do 2 contests and you have to do this many visits. And really, you're being offered the possibility, the opportunity to change a life. Yes, that's tongue in cheek. Yes, everybody says that, but no, there is a chance that the contest that you'll hold, an interaction that you'll have during a club visit, will change the trajectory of somebody's life. They may find that they can do something, or that they will take on something they didn't think they would do, and that they were successful. That they will take a chance that they would not have ordinarily taken. That's life-changing. And we don't talk about that enough as district leaders. This is what you have the opportunity to do. And I think changing the language of what we say leadership is about is how we get more leaders in here. We say, oh, you have the opportunity to change your life. Well, how? People are coming here all the time, scared of their own shadow. But when they leave here, you can't make them stop talking. That's going to change something in their life. That's for sure. And you can see that. And I'd say maybe 1 time out of 10 of the times that you've changed people's lives, somebody will find you 4 years down the road and they will tell you that. And they'll say, hey, Louisa, remember that thing that you did for me 5 years ago? And you're like, what? And they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. That changed my life. I started doing this. I got a new job right after that. And it was, Louisa's now reinforcing her thing to do this more because she knows she has an impact. There was a slide at mid-year training. It was a Chinese proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. It would have been great if we told Louisa 5 years ago that she changed a life. The second best time is now. So that's, I think, what we need to talk to about with our district leaders. And it looks like the red card is up. Wow, look at that. We did suck up all the time. Well, you know, you guys are good like that. We're Toastmasters. We would make it happen. So thank you so much for having me with you. And it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Stefano. It's been So much fun. And you know, secretly, I think this is the one district where you probably could have gotten away with no jacket, no tie. A little group of 22 people. It's intimate. But we loved what you had to say. We've definitely written down some notes of some lessons learned and some ideas of best practices and things to move forward with. Thank you so much for being with us. And we are now going to hand it back to Lucena, our hostess with the mostest. Lucena.
Thank you so much.